The whisper before the vows. The morning light filtered through the bridal suite windows of the Rosewood Manor, casting everything in that golden glow Natalie had dreamed about since she was 12. Her wedding dress hung like a promise on the vintage armoire, its delicate lace catching the sunlight. Today was supposed to be perfect. Today was supposed to be the beginning of her happily ever after with Derek. Natalie sat at the antique vanity, watching her makeup artist apply the final touches of mascara. In the mirror, she could see the controlled chaos behind her bridesmaids in soft pink dresses, her mother fussing with flower arrangements, and the distant sound of guests arriving for the 2 p.m. ceremony. Everything was exactly as she'd planned. For the past 18 months? "You look absolutely radiant," said Chloe, her maid of honor, but something in her voice seemed strained. Natalie had known Chloe since college, and she could read every nuance of her best friend's expressions. Today, Chloe kept checking her phone and avoiding direct eye contact. "You've been acting strange all morning," Natalie said, turning from the mirror. "What's going on?" Chloe forced a smile. "Just wedding day nerves. You know how I get." But Natalie did know how Chloe got, and this wasn't nerves. This was something else entirely. Before she could press further, her mother swept over. With the pearl necklace that had been worn by 3 generations of brides in their family, "These belonged to your great-grandmother," her mother said, her eyes misty. "She always said they brought lasting love." Natalie felt the cool weight of the pearls against her throat and smiled. Derek had laughed when she'd told him about the family tradition, calling it superstitious nonsense, but he'd agreed to let her wear them. She'd learned to pick her battles with Derek over the months of wedding planning. As her mother moved away to help with last-minute arrangements, Chloe grabbed Natalie's arm. "I need to show you something," she whispered urgently. "But not here. Too many people." They slipped into the small adjoining bathroom, and Chloe locked the door behind them. Her hands were shaking as she pulled out her phone. "I wasn't sure if I should tell you," Chloe began, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I couldn't let you walk down that aisle without knowing." "Knowing what?" Natalie's heart began to race. Chloe held up her phone, showing a series of text messages. "These are from Derek's phone. He left it on the bar last night during the rehearsal dinner when he went to the bathroom. It was buzzing constantly, so I glanced at it to see if it was important." Natalie's breath caught as she read the messages on the screen. They were from Victoria, Derek's ex-girlfriend from college. The timestamp showed they'd been exchanged late last night. Long after the rehearsal dinner had ended, "Victoria, I can't believe you're really going through with this tomorrow. Derek, I have to. Everything's already planned. Victoria, but what about what we talked about? What about us? Derek, I need to see you. One last time. Meet me at the old pier in 20 minutes. Victoria, Derek, this is crazy. You're giddy. Married tomorrow. Derek, I know. That's exactly why I need to see you." The phone slipped from Natalie's numb fingers, but Chloe caught it. "There's more," she said gently. "Photos from last night." Natalie didn't want to see them, but she couldn't look away. There was Derek, still in his rehearsal dinner clothes, holding Victoria on the pier where he'd first told Natalie he loved her 2 years ago. The same pier where he'd proposed 6 months later. The bathroom seemed to spin around her. All those months of planning, all those dreams, all those compromises she'd made to keep Derek happy. The smaller wedding party because he didn't want too much fuss. The venue changed because this one was more practical. The honeymoon destination switched because he preferred mountains to beaches. "Natalie, I'm so sorry," Chloe whispered. "But you deserve to know." For a moment, Natalie thought she might collapse. Then something shifted inside her, something strong and clear she hadn't felt in months. She looked at herself in the bathroom. Mirror, the perfect makeup, the elegant updo, the family pearls. She looked beautiful. But more importantly, she looked like herself. The real herself. Not the version she'd been molding to fit Derek's expectations. "How long until the ceremony?" she asked, her voice surprisingly steady. 15 minutes, Chloe," replied, watching her carefully. Natalie nodded slowly. "Then I have 15 minutes to decide what kind of woman I want to be." She unlocked the bathroom door and walked back into the bridal suite, her head held high. Outside the window, She could see guests taking their seats under the rose arbor where she was supposed to marry Derek in less than a quarter hour. But first, she had something to say. The moment of reckoning, the chapel doors stood open like a mouth waiting to swallow her whole. Natalie could hear the gentle murmur of 200 guests, the soft notes of the string quartet, and the rustle of programs in nervous hands. Pastor Williams stood at the altar in his ceremonial robes, checking his watch. Derek waited beside him in his charcoal gray tuxedo, straightening his tie and flashing that confident smile that had once made her heart skip. Now it made her stomach turn. "Natalie, sweetheart, it's time," her father said, appearing at her elbow with tears in his eyes. He'd been looking forward to this moment for months, practicing his father of bride speech and joking about finally getting rid of his little girl. The love in his weathered face nearly broke her resolve. "Dad," she said quietly, "I need you to trust me, okay?
Right.
No matter what happens in the next few minutes." He frowned, studying her face. "What do you mean? Are you having cold feet?" "That's normal, honey. Your mother had them too." "No," Natalie said, touching the pearls at her throat. "This isn't cold feet. This is clarity." Before he could respond, she stepped away from him and walked toward the chapel's side entrance. Instead of heading down the aisle as planned, she moved toward the small platform where the microphone stood. The one Derek had insisted they didn't need for their vows because we're not putting on a show. The string quartet faltered and stopped, playing as guests turned to watch her unexpected movement. A ripple of confused murmurs swept through the crowd. Derek's confident smile flickered, replaced by a look of bewilderment. Natalie reached for the microphone, her hand steady despite the magnitude of what she was about to do. The chapel fell completely silent except for the soft whir of the air conditioning and someone's nervous cough in the back row. "Thank you all for being here today," she began, her voice clear and strong. "I know you came expecting to witness a wedding, and I'm grateful for your love and support. You've traveled from near and far, taken time from your busy lives, and brought your hearts full of joy for what you believed would be Derek's and my special day." She paused, looking out at the sea of faces: Derek's college friends, her work colleagues, elderly relatives who'd driven hours to be there, children in their Sunday best fidgeting in the pews. These people cared about her. They deserved the truth. "However," she continued, "I cannot in good conscience make promises to a man who broke his to me before we even made them official." The silence shattered. Gasps echoed through the chapel. Derek stepped forward, his face flushing red. "Natalie, what are you doing?" "This isn't the time or place, actually, Derek. This is exactly the time and place," she said, never taking her eyes off the gathered crowd. "Last night, after our rehearsal dinner, while I was at home writing my vows and dreaming about our future, you were meeting your ex-girlfriend at the pier. It's the same pier where you proposed to me." The sound that rose from the guests was like air being sucked from the room. Derek's mother covered her mouth with her hands. Natalie's own mother looked stunned, gripping her father's arm for support. "I have the text messages," Natalie said simply, "and the photographs. But more importantly, I have my self-respect, and I refuse to start a marriage built on deception." Derek's face had gone from red to pale. "Natalie, please, we can talk about this privately. You're embarrassing both of us." "No, Derek, you embarrassed us. I'm just telling the truth." She turned back to the microphone. "I want to thank Marcus Reynolds, our photographer, who helped me realize that sometimes the most important pictures are the ones that show us who people really are." From his position near the altar, Marcus, quiet man in his early 30s with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, nodded almost imperceptibly. He'd been documenting their relationship for months, and unlike everyone else, he'd never seemed swept up in the romance of it all. He'd watched with professional detachment that Natalie now realized had been knowing concern. "I'm sorry for the confusion and disappointment," Natalie continued, addressing the crowd one final time. "But I'm not sorry for choosing honesty over convenience, truth over appearances, and self-respect over a beautiful lie." She removed Derek's engagement ring, the 2-carat princess cut he'd chosen without consulting her, insisting he knew what she'd like, and held it up for everyone to see. Then she walked calmly to where he stood frozen beside Pastor Williams. "This belongs to you," she said, pressing the ring into his palm, "along with whatever future you thought we were going to have." Derek's mouth opened and closed like a fish, gasping for air. "Natalie, you're making a huge mistake. We can work through this. It didn't mean anything with Victoria." "That's the problem, Derek," she replied. "If it didn't mean anything, then neither did I." She turned away from him and walked toward the chapel doors, her wedding dress trailing behind her like a white flag of surrender that was actually a banner of victory. The guests parted like water as she passed, some reaching out to touch her arm in support, others too shocked to move. As she reached the threshold, she paused and looked back one last time. Derek stood alone at the altar, still holding her ring, looking smaller somehow in his expensive tuxedo. Pastor Williams had his hand on Derek's shoulder, speaking quietly. The guests sat in stunned silence, unsure whether to leave or stay, but Natalie's eyes found Marcus still standing with his camera. And for the first time all day, she smiled. A real smile. Not the practiced bride smile she'd been wearing for photos. Then she stepped through the doors and into the afternoon sunlight. Finally, free fragments and new beginnings 3 weeks after what the local newspaper had dubbed the wedding that wasn't. Natalie sat in her small apartment surrounded by returned wedding gifts and the scattered pieces of a life she was rebuilding from scratch. The dress hung in her closet like a ghost she couldn't quite bring herself to donate yet. The apartment felt too quiet without Derek's constant presence, but it also felt authentically hers. For the first time in 2 years, Emma, her younger sister, had moved in temporarily to help with what she'd cheerfully called Operation Phoenix Rising. Emma was everything Natalie wasn't spontaneous. Where Natalie was methodical, artistic, where Natalie was practical, optimistic in a way that bordered on reckless. Right now, she was sprawled on the living room floor, sorting through wedding cards and making piles labeled keep, return, and burn for therapeutic purposes. "Listen to this one," Emma said, holding up a card. "We're so proud of your courage. You showed us all what real strength looks like. It's from Mrs. Patterson, your 3rd-grade teacher. She's 87 years old and she drove 3 hours to witness your non-wedding, and she says it was the most inspiring thing she's seen in decades." Natalie managed a weak smile. The support had been overwhelming, but so had the attention. The story had spread through their small town like wildfire, and she couldn't go to the grocery store without someone stopping her to share their own. The story of dodged bullets and narrow escapes from bad relationships. "I never wanted to be inspiring," Natalie said, pulling her knees up to her chest. "I just wanted to not marry a cheater." "Sometimes being inspiring is a side effect of being honest," Emma replied, moving to the keep pile. She held up another envelope. "This one doesn't have a return address, but the handwriting looks masculine." Natalie took the envelope with curiosity. Inside was a simple white card with a photograph tucked behind it. The photo made her breath catch. It was from her non-wedding day, but it wasn't one of the formal shots Marcus had been hired to take. This was candid, captured in the moment she'd stepped through the chapel doors into the sunlight. Her face was turned slightly upward, eyes closed, and despite everything that had just happened, she looked peaceful. Free. The card contained a brief message in careful handwriting. "Dear Natalie, I hope you don't mind that I kept this photo for myself for a few weeks before printing you a copy. I wanted to be sure I captured what I thought I saw someone discovering who she really was. You didn't just save your own life that day. You reminded everyone watching that integrity matters more than appearances. I hope you're doing well." Marcus Reynolds at the bottom. He'd written his phone number in a simple line. "If you ever want to see the other photos from that death, the real ones, it's not the wedding ones, I'd be honored to share them." Emma peered over her shoulder. "Marcus Reynolds. It's the wedding photographer," Natalie said, studying the photo. She remembered Marcus as quiet and professional, always present but never intrusive. Unlike Derek, who'd dismissed Marcus as just the help, Natalie had appreciated his unobtrusive presence and the way he seemed to anticipate moments before they happened. "And he sent you a photo of yourself looking like a goddess emerging from the ruins of your old life because—" Emma raised an eyebrow. "Because he's kind, I think," Natalie said, surprised by how much the gesture meant to her in the weeks since. The wedding? She'd receive flowers, cards, and casseroles from well-meaning friends and family. But nothing had touched her quite like this simple acknowledgement of her strength. That evening, after Emma had gone to her night shift at the art gallery, Natalie found herself staring at Marcus's phone number. She'd written and deleted a dozen text messages, unsure what to say. Finally, she settled on something simple. "Thank you for the photo. It's beautiful. I'd love to see the others when you have time." His response came 20 minutes later. "I'm free tomorrow afternoon, if you'd like to stop by my studio. No pressure. Just thought you might want to see how your story looked through someone else's eyes." The next day, Natalie found herself standing outside Marcus's photography studio. A converted warehouse space in the arts district she'd always loved, but Derek had dismissed as pretentious. The walls were lined with his work landscapes, portraits and candid street photography that captured moments of genuine human emotion. Marcus greeted her with the same quiet warmth she remembered from their wedding planning meetings. He was dressed casually in jeans and a navy sweater, his wire-rimmed glasses slightly smudged with what looked like developing chemicals. "I wasn't sure you'd come," he admitted, leading her to a comfortable seating area in the corner of the studio. "I wasn't sure either," Natalie said honestly, "but I realized I've been curious about those photos. It's about how someone else saw what happened." Marcus pulled out a portfolio and set it on the coffee table between them. "These aren't wedding photos," he said. "They're truth photos. Some of them might be hard to see." As Natalie flipped through the collection, she saw her story unfold from an outsider's perspective. There were photos of her in the bridal suite, but Marcus had captured the moments between. Poses, her genuine laughter with Emma, the way her shoulders tensed when Derek's name came up, the instant her face changed when Chloe showed her the phone. "You saw it all," she said softly. "I see a lot in my work," Marcus replied. "Boys." But I'd never seen someone choose themselves so clearly in such a public moment. It was remarkable. They talked for 2 hours about photography, about truth, about the difference between what people wanted to see and what actually was. Marcus made coffee in a French press and shared stories about other weddings he'd photographed, other moments when he'd witnessed people's real selves emerge from behind their carefully constructed facades. As the afternoon light began to slant through the studio windows, Natalie realized she felt lighter than she had in months. Not because Marcus was flirting with her, he wasn't, but because he was treating her like a whole person, not a victim or a cautionary tale or an inspiration. Just Natalie, figuring out what came next. "Would you like to have dinner sometime?" he asked, as she gathered her things to leave. "As friends. I know you're probably not ready for anything else, and honestly, neither am I. But I'd like to know you better outside the context of weddings and drama." Natalie smiled, the first completely unguarded smile she'd managed in weeks. "I'd like that very much." Building something real 6 months later, autumn had painted the town in shades of gold and crimson, and Natalie barely recognized the woman she'd been on that spring wedding day. She stood in Marcus's kitchen, laughing as he attempted to flip pancakes with the dramatic flair of a professional chef, sending half of one onto the floor, where his golden retriever, Scout, waited hopefully. "Your technique needs work," she said, nudging him aside to take over the spatula. "My technique is flawless," Marcus protested, wrapping his arms around her waist from behind. "Scout's just an opportunistic critic." The relationship had grown. Slowly, carefully, like a photograph developing in Marcus's dark room. It started with those dinners as friends. Conversations that stretched late into the evening as they discovered shared passions for old movies, hiking trails, and the kind of deep discussions that Derek had always dismissed as overthinking everything. Marcus had a way of listening that Natalie had forgotten existed, not waiting for his turn to speak, actually absorbing what she said and building on it. When she'd mentioned wanting to take a pottery class, he'd signed up with her. She'd worried about changing careers from her corporate marketing job to something more meaningful. He'd spent hours helping her research nonprofit organizations that needed communications help. "Emma's coming for dinner tonight," Natalie said, expertly flipping a perfect golden pancake. "She wants to interrogate you some more about your intentions with her big sister." Marcus laughed. "I thought the interrogation went well last time. She only threatened to hide my camera equipment if I hurt you, which seemed reasonable. That was the preliminary interrogation. This is the full assessment. Natalie turned in his arms to face him. She's also bringing someone, a guy named Tyler, from her art class. Apparently watching us be disgustingly happy has inspired her to try dating again. Are we disgustingly happy? Right, Marcus asked, brushing a strand of hair from her face. Revolting, Natalie confirmed, standing on her tiptoes to kiss him. It's terrible. We communicate openly. We support each other's goals. We laugh at the same ridiculous things. It's everything a relationship shouldn't be according to romantic comedies. The contrast with Derek was stark and liberating. Where Derek had needed to be the center of every conversation, Marcus was genuinely interested in other people's stories. Where Derek had made decisions for both of them without consulting her, Marcus insisted on collaboration, even for small choices like which movie to watch. Where Derek had criticized her friends and family, Marcus had embraced them all, even volunteering to help Emma hang her latest art installation. That evening, Emma arrived with Tyler, a soft-spoken ceramics artist with paint-stained fingers and an easy smile. As they sat around Marcus's dining table, sharing stories and passing dishes family style, Natalie felt something she hadn't experienced in years. Complete contentment with a simple moment. So Marcus, Emma said, cutting into her. Chicken with theatrical precision, Natalie tells me you're thinking about opening a gallery space in your studio. I am, Marcus replied, glancing at Natalie with a smile. Actually, it was Natalie's idea. She thinks I've been hiding my work for too long. Because you have been, Natalie said firmly. You have an entire room full of gorgeous photographs that nobody gets to see because you're too modest to show them. Tyler leaned forward with interest. What kind of photography? Portraits, mostly, Marcus said. But not traditional ones. I like capturing people in moments when they forget they're being photographed, when they're just ... themselves. He has this incredible series of couples, Natalie added, but they're not posed wedding shots. They're real moments arguing over directions, laughing at inside jokes, comforting each other. The honesty is beautiful. Emma exchanged a look with Tyler that Natalie recognized. The silent communication of two people who were definitely interested in each other but trying to play it cool. That sounds like something I'd want to see, Tyler said. I work with couples too, in my pottery classes. There's something magical about watching people create together. As the evening progressed, Natalie found herself observing Marcus, the way he observed others through his camera lens. She watched him patiently explain his developing process to Tyler, saw how he made sure Emma felt included in every conversation, noticed the way he automatically refilled everyone's wine glasses. Without making a show of being the perfect host, later, as they cleaned up together, Emma pulled Natalie aside in the kitchen. Okay, I have to admit it, Emma said, scraping plates with more enthusiasm than necessary. I was worried you were rebounding or trying to prove something or just afraid to be alone. But this is real, isn't it? It's real, Natalie confirmed. It's also completely different from anything I thought I wanted. With Derek, everything felt like a performance. It's like we were playing house instead of actually building a life. With Marcus, it just ... fits. Even the quiet parts. Especially the quiet parts. Natalie smiled, thinking of the mornings they spent reading newspapers together, or the evenings when Marcus worked in his dark room while she read nearby, both of them content in comfortable silence. Derek always needed entertainment, stimulation, drama. Marcus is happy just being present. Emma hugged her sister tightly. I'm proud of you, Not just for the wedding thing, although that was pretty spectacular, but for this. For figuring out what you actually want, instead of what you think you should want. A few weeks later, Natalie received an unexpected text that made her stomach clench with old anxiety. It was from Derek. Can we talk? I've been doing some thinking. She showed the message to Marcus, who read it without the jealousy or possessiveness Derek would have displayed in reverse circumstances. What do you want to do? He asked simply. I want to delete it and pretend I never saw it, Natalie said. But I also think I need closure. Not for him, for me. They met at a neutral coffee shop, and Derek looked different, tired, thinner, less sure of himself. He apologized, explained that losing her had made him realize his mistakes. Asked if they could try again, Natalie listened politely, feeling nothing but a distant sort of pity. This man had once consumed her thoughts. shaped her decisions, made her question her own instincts. Now he seemed small, irrelevant to the life she was building. "I hope you find what you're looking for, Derek," she said finally. "But it isn't with me. I'm not the same person I was 6 months ago, because of him." Derek asked, a flash of his old possessiveness showing through. "Because of me," Natalie corrected. "I finally figured out who I am when I'm not trying to be someone else's idea of perfect." When she returned home to Marcus's studio, she found him in his gallery space, hanging prints for his upcoming show. He looked up when she entered, reading her face with the same attention he brought to composing a photograph. "How did it go?" he asked. "It went exactly how it needed to," she said, moving to help him adjust a frame. "He's part of my story, but he's not part of my future." Marcus nodded, understanding without needing explanation. Another small miracle of their relationship. "Ready to help me with the rest of these?" "I want everything perfect for the opening." "Ready," Natalie said, and meant it completely. The wedding she chose 1 year and 2 months after the wedding that never was. Natalie stood in Emma's small apartment, looking at herself in a simple mirror instead of the elaborate vanity at Rosewood Manor. This time, there were no professional hair and makeup artists, no stressed wedding planner checking her watch, no chaos of bridesmaids in matching dresses. Just Emma, Chloe, and Marcus's mother, Helen, who had become like a second mother to Natalie over the past year. "You look perfect," Helen said, adjusting the delicate wildflower crown Emma had crafted from the garden behind Marcus's studio. Simple and perfect. Natalie's dress was nothing like the elaborate ball gown she'd worn before. This one was flowing and comfortable, made of soft cream-colored fabric that moved like water when she walked. She'd found it at a small boutique during a weekend trip with Marcus. And when she'd tried it on, he'd said simply, "That's you. That's exactly you." "Are you nervous?" Chloe asked, securing the last bobby pin in Natalie's loosely braided hair. "No," Natalie said, surprised by her own certainty. "I'm excited. There's a difference." The venue was Marcus's photography studio, transformed with Emma's artistic touch into an intimate garden party. Fairy lights hung from the exposed beams, and mason jars filled with wildflowers sat on mismatched vintage tables Emma had collected from thrift stores. The guest list included only 30 people, close family, dear friends, and a few colleagues who had become family over the years. Pastor Williams, who had witnessed Natalie's moment of truth a year ago, had asked to officiate this wedding as well. "I've been performing ceremonies for 40 years, he told them during their planning meeting, "and I've never been more certain that two people were meant to be together." Marcus waited for her not at an elaborate altar, but under the oak tree, in the small courtyard behind his studio, the same tree where they'd shared their first kiss 3 months after her non-wedding. He wore a simple gray suit with a boutonniere Emma had made from herbs and baby's breath. His eyes found hers the moment she stepped outside, and his smile was so full of joy that several guests openly wept. Tyler, who had become Emma's boyfriend, and was quickly integrating into their chosen family, walked Natalie down the short aisle between chairs borrowed from the community center. Her father had passed away peacefully in his sleep 2 months earlier, and while his absence ached, Natalie felt his presence in the way Tyler squeezed her arm before placing her hand in Marcus's. "Hi," Marcus whispered as she reached him. "Hi. Yourself," she whispered back, and they both started laughing, which made their small gathering of loved ones laugh too. Pastor Williams cleared his throat with amusement. "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to witness something rare and beautiful. Two people who have found in each other not just love, but truth. Natalie and Marcus, you've asked to write your own vows, and I understand they're a little unconventional." Natalie pulled a small piece of paper from her bouquet of wildflowers and herbs. "Marcus, I promise to tell you the truth, even when it's uncomfortable. I promise to support your dreams, even when they scare me. I promise to laugh with you, cry with you, and sit in comfortable silence with you. I promise to choose you every day, not because I have to, but because I want to. And I promise to never pretend to be someone else to make you happy, because you love me exactly as I am." Marcus's vows were written on the back of a photograph, the picture he'd taken of her leaving the chapel that day a year ago. Natalie, I promise to see you clearly, all of you, and love what I see. I promise to capture our life together, not just in photographs, but in memories, in small moments, in the way we build something beautiful together. I promise to be your partner, not your audience, and to create a life with you that's so authentic, we never need to perform for anyone else. And I promise to always remember that the most beautiful thing I ever photographed was you choosing yourself. There were no rings. They'd decided together that they wanted to design their own wedding bands over the coming months, taking their time to create something meaningful rather than choosing from a catalog. Instead, they exchanged small gifts. Gave Marcus a vintage camera she'd found at an antique shop, engraved with the date they'd first met. Marcus gave Natalie a leather-bound journal with their story written on the first page in his careful handwriting. When Pastor Williams pronounced them married, Marcus cupped Natalie's face in his hands and kissed her gently, as if they had all the time in the world. The small gathering erupted in cheers and applause. "Ladies and gentlemen," Pastor Williams announced with a broad smile, "present to you Mr. and Mrs. Reynolds, a couple who proves that sometimes the best stories begin when we have the courage to walk away from the wrong ending." The reception was held right there in the studio courtyard. Emma had strung more lights between the trees, and Tyler had crafted ceramic plates as wedding favors. There was no formal dinner service. Instead, everyone contributed a dish, potluck style, creating a feast that felt like a family gathering rather than a catered event. Derek's name never came up, not once during the entire celebration. He'd become irrelevant to Natalie's story, a plot point that had led her to the life she was supposed to have. As the evening wound down and guests began to leave, Natalie found herself alone with Marcus under their oak tree. Scout, wearing a flower collar Emma had made for him, dozed contentedly at their feet. So Marcus said, pulling her close, "How does it feel to be married to a photographer?" "Like coming home," Natalie said simply. "Like everything that happened before was just preparation for this. Even the hard parts. Especially the hard parts." She looked up at the fairy lights twinkling above them like stars. "I never would have found you if I hadn't found myself first." Marcus spun her slowly under the lights, and somewhere in the distance, Emma was documenting the moment with Marcus's backup camera, ensuring they'd have photographs to remember not just how they looked, but how they felt. "I love you, Mrs. Reynolds," Marcus whispered against her ear. "I love you too, Mr. Reynolds," she whispered back. For real this time. As they danced under the oak tree where they'd first kissed, surrounded by the people who loved them exactly as they were, Natalie realized that sometimes the most important word you can say isn't yes, it's no. No to the wrong person, no to the wrong life, no to the beautiful lie that looks perfect from the outside. Sometimes the most beautiful wedding isn't the one that goes according to plan. Sometimes it's the one that happens after you've learned the difference between what you thought you wanted and what you actually need. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, those two things turn out to be the same person after all. The end.